Okay, so I've heard from several of you that you're able to get in, and it looks like we have about 17 people here with us. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning for this Teams Live event. Our topic today is dedicated irrigation meters and their role in helping you as water suppliers calculate your urban water use objectives. This format may look different for you. This is a Teams Live event as opposed to a traditional Teams meeting. You will all be able to interact with the presenters through the Q&A feature, and that's going to be monitored by Efrain Lopez. After each presentation, we will allow time for a few speaker-specific questions, but we've also left plenty of time at the end of all the speakers' presentations to make sure we cover all of your questions. This is the first time that we produced a Teams Live event, at least in the conservation team has, and there's a lot that needs to happen in the background, so I want to personally thank you in advance for your patience while we navigate this new technical frontier. And before I turn it over to Elizabeth, I'd like to thank those of you who responded to our survey and show you the results of one of the questions, and that was, do you have landscape area measurements for your dedicated irrigation meter accounts? 63% of you responded that you do not have those measurements. So that's a little reassurance that you are not alone. So now I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth. So please stand by while I attempt to send it on over to her.
All right, Jenny, just let me know when we're ready to go.
Oops, wrong presentation. No, I got that right. Okay, Elizabeth, you're live.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, I just want to welcome everybody to our landscape area measurement workshop. We appreciate you taking some time this Monday morning to kind of go over this with us. This is going to be recorded, so if you miss anything, don't worry, you can watch the video later. You can also, we'll have plenty of time this time around to have question and answer. Just a quick overview of the agenda. Joni's kind of already gone over introductions. I'm going to give an overview of the California Landscape Water Use Objectives and some other things that are going on with the standards currently. And then we have 3 case studies that are going to be presented, one from Irvine Ranch, one from Coachella Valley, and one from the city of San Diego. After those, we'll have plenty of time to do a Q&A session, and then we'll wrap up. Next slide, please. Okay. So, update on water conservation objectives. I'm sure you've seen this formula many times: indoor use, outdoor use, water loss, variances, and bonuses. For those of you that have been participating in the DWR workshops over the last several weeks and months, there's been a lot of activity recently, especially on the outdoor use and the variances. Water loss, proposed water loss standard was released about a week or so ago, and they had a workshop last week on that. Indoor use has been kind of quiet since last fall, but we're looking for a workshop on that coming up in a couple of weeks. Next slide, please. So just looking at some timelines, permanent monthly reporting started October 1st, 2020. That was part of the legislation. So that's been going on for quite a while. Water loss standards were initially supposed to be done mid-2020. Now we're looking at mid-2021. As I just said, they just released another proposal. I'm sorry, they actually released the peer review and their analysis for the peer review, and then they're still working on some changes to the model before that gets released. We're looking for the regulatory process to start on that in the next several weeks. Recommendations on indoor standards were initially due in January of 2021. We've heard rumors that they're going to be released in April, and so there should be a workshop on them, at least the studies, if not the actual recommendation, and this should be finalized in the June timeframe. Residential irrigable land measurements. Hopefully everyone has gotten those by now. DWR was aiming to get everyone their measurements for the residential accounts by the end of March. And they did a really complex method on developing these landscape measurements. Some agencies are finding that they're relatively accurate. Some have had some challenges with them, and we can answer some questions on that if anyone's got any questions on that. We are coming up close to the October 21 deadline that DWR has to make water use efficiency standard recommendations to the state board. After the state board gets those recommendations, they have until July of 2021. July of 2022 to adopt those standards. And then water shortage assessment starts in June 2022, and our urban water management plans and water shortage contingency plans are due July of this year. Next slide, please. I wanted to go briefly into the enforcement time period. Just to clarify things, there was a legislation that was done in 2019 that changed some of the dates that were in the initial legislation. And initially, calculations were done in November. Those were pushed until January. Basically, now everything is either due in January or July. And so we have two major due dates every year. January 1 of 2024 is going to be the first report that everyone has to be done. So that's when you have all your calculations done, all your landscape area measurements, all the standards, variances, and have that all put together to provide to the state board. At that point, the state board may issue information orders that if you're not meeting the standards or if you don't supply the information. January 1 of 2025, then we're going to provide a progress report to show how you're doing. At that time, you might get a written notice if you're not meeting the standard. 2026, it moves up to conservation orders not to meeting standards. And 2027 and the annual after, that's when civil liabilities and fines may apply. I just want to, one of the things that's being discussed right now is perhaps an alternative method of compliance. And this came up with in relation to the water loss standards. Water loss, because it was part of SB 555 and not just the conservation standards, it may actually be enforced separately. So you may be meeting your efficiency standard, but not your water loss standard. And so if you are not meeting your water loss standard, you can actually still face liabilities and fines. Now, one of the things we're trying to do is see if there's, especially for those that have more than a 30% reduction that they have to make, if there's an alternative method of compliance, is that when you do your first report back in January of 2024, if you can say, I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z to try and meet my target. And as long as you're doing those things that you do, if we can get the state board to bless them, and then, you'll be considered in compliance if you're working on those things. And so that's one of the things that we're working on right now to try and see if we can get a proposal before DWR and eventually the state board to kind of give a path B, especially for agencies that have significant amount of changes to make before 2027, kind of give a plan beyond that. Next slide, please. Indoor targets. I think we've all seen the Assembly Bill 1434. Right now, the legislation has in it that indoor standards for residential use will go from 55 gallons per capita per day down to 50 gallons per capita per day from 2025 to 2030. Assembly Bill 1434 takes it from 48 down to 40 gallons per capita per day. We're still waiting to hear, as I said before, the recommendation and the report on the indoor efficiency standards. And so hopefully we'll see that occurred either April 12th or the week of April 19th. So one of those, in a couple of weeks, they're planning to have a workshop on that as well. So next slide, please. Outdoor irrigation, that's what we're here to talk about today. Again, we have the outdoor target's going to be based on evapotranspiration specific to your area. DWR is recommending the use of spatial semis to develop an ET. And then they're looking at landscape area measurements. There's going to be two sets of landscape area measurements. First one, again, you should all have received your landscape area measurements for residential. accounts. Those were provided by DWR. They are planning to have a meeting on April 14th to go over some of the concerns that have been seen on the landscape area measurements and answer some questions. And they are planning to extend the deadline to review those landscape area measurements. They haven't released what that deadline is going to be yet. The other part of those outdoor targets are going to be for dedicated landscape measurements, and those are going to be developed by each supplier on their own. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we heard out of DWR at the last standards meeting that kind of addressed the outdoor efficiency standard. One of the things they're looking about is how to account for irrigable and irrigated area. What they're finding is that it's likely that a lot of the irrigable area isn't actually irrigated. So if you use that area to kind of calculate the total applied water currently, you have a ET adjustment factor of about 0.5. If you just look at just irrigated area and don't include that irrigable area, it goes up to 0.79, the mean of that. So there's quite a lot of variability depending on how much irrigable area you're considering in your target. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? So DWR is looking at 5 different options. One of them is going to be one single standard based on irrigable area. If that one occurs, you will probably have a lower ET adjustment factor, just like we saw, that if you have a higher amount of landscape area, your adjustment factor will probably go down. One would be a single outdoor standard based on irrigated area, not consistent with the legislation, which calls for the irrigable area to be included in there. And so it's unlikely that that will be done. There's an option that the outdoor areas will be based on a sliding scale over time. And then the last 2 options, option 4 and option 5, I think are the preferred options. Option 4 is 2 outdoor standards, one based on irrigated that has a higher percentage or a higher ET adjustment factor. The other one is irrigable, which has a lower ET adjustment factor or a lower percentage, either one of those. The other one is that you have a single standard and a buffer. So if you don't meet your initial target, then you would have a buffer based on the amount of irrigable area that you have. I'm going to click again, Joni. Joni, there you go. So these 2 options are what's, I think, option 5 is what's being recommended by DWR. Option 4 has been recommended by some of the suppliers. It is very unlikely that all of the irrigable area will be included in the standard at the same ET adjustment factor as irrigated area. So that's something to keep in mind as you're doing your review of your residential landscape areas. Is don't look at the total area. Kind of look at the irrigable and the irrigated separately and see how those two interact together. So if you have a high irrigable area, then you might want to just kind of see what happens if that's not, that the water is not available to you and where you are with your standard on that. So that's 2 things to consider. Again, no adjustment factor has been discussed yet. We're still waiting to hear on that. There's a lot of work to do to continue on this. Next slide, please. Some other things that we're working on right now is proposals for how to deal with some of the issues that came up when there was a review of the residential landscape area measurement. The first one, and I think this impacts several agencies within the San Diego region, the residential agricultural landscape proposal. So anything over an acre was excluded from the anything with over an acre of agricultural use was excluded from the residential landscape area measurements. This might pose a challenge to agencies that don't have their meters geocoded and can't identify which residential meters are feeding large agricultural sites. All single-family residential might be grouped together. So the idea was to give agencies the option to either include or exclude residential ag accounts. What we've heard feedback from DWR is they're pretty amenable to this this proposal, that what they've kind of said is that if you can exclude your meters, so you can take out those single family residential meters that are feeding agricultural use, you don't have to do anything. You can just use the residential landscape area measurements as they are. When you're doing your compliance, just leave out those meters that feed those large residential ag accounts, then you're good. If you can't separate those out, you need to include that agricultural area in with your other residential landscape area measurements. Then you can go through a variance process, and DWR will provide the parcel information for the agriculture that they excluded from the residential area landscape measurements, and you can add that area back in. Next slide, please. Another proposal that's been discussed is new development proposal. Again, this is anything that was developed after the 2018 timeline, or even if it was like developed in 2018, but the land use wasn't correct and it wasn't identified as residential use. It wasn't included in the residential landscape area measurements. And so the idea is to allow suppliers to either, if you have the imagery or parcel information, you can add that in there. If you don't have that information, you can do a calculation that says, hey, we've added this many number of new residential accounts. This is the average size of that type of residential account, and we want to adjust our landscape area measurement by that much area. DWR is proposing to re-fly or evaluate the landscape area measurements every 5 years, and so you have a 5-year check on that. One of the things that we've kind of talked with DWR is they wanted to use this as part of a variance process. Our thought is that this is not a variance, it's just a correction to your data, and so it should just be part of the annual supply and demand, it should be part of the annual calculation that you do, and not a separate variance process. Next slide, please. Finally, we're looking at a proposal for recycled water. This would just use the ET adjustment factor and the amount of applied recycled water that you have for landscape or residential landscape use, and just use the difference between between 1 and whatever the target ET adjustment factor that comes out of that, multiply it by the acre feet per year of water that's used, and add that onto your final target. So again, it kind of gives you don't have to go back and measure, if you have multifamily areas that are served with recycled water, you don't have to identify those. It might be an easy workaround. We're still working with DWR and other suppliers on this proposal, and would love to hear your feedback on whether this would work for your recycled water areas as well. Next slide, please. What we're going to discuss today is dedicated irrigation meters. As I said, they're included in the outdoor target. They are not included in the residential landscape area measurements that DWR has provided. They are supposed to be provided by the supplier. You might have some overlap. If you have an apartment building that has a dedicated landscape measurement, then it would be included in the residential measurements. So it's something to be aware of, that where are these dedicated meters? Are they being used for residential? If they're being used for residential, was that included in your landscape area measurements that DWR did? And so it's something that you're going to have to identify what meters are serving where, and really pull that out. Things that are still to be determined. What are the extent of measurements? Early on, several years ago, I had conversations with DWR, and they were talking about measuring every single landscape meter might actually not be all that effective. There might be some very small dedicated irrigation meters that aren't using a whole lot of water. So would it be better to focus on those larger meters using a significant amount of water and get most of the water use, instead of really diving deep into there, especially for agencies that haven't done it yet? What is the methodology for measuring? What will DWR accept as accurate, and what kind of validation do they want? And then again, what do they want to? Is there any difference in the criteria for irrigable versus irrigated in the commercial sector as opposed to the residential. And so those are things that are still to be determined. And again, we would love your feedback for this as we work and advocate with DWR on coming up with their recommendations. Next slide, please. I know I've gone over a lot of information. Again, if you have any questions, always feel free to call me and or contact me or send me an email. I'd be happy to help you with that. And then Efren, let's see, do we have any questions on the chat?
Hey, Elizabeth, no, we don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll give it back to Jenny.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And now I'm going to turn it over to our first case study presenter. Irvine Ranch, Enrique Zanetti is a senior water efficiency analyst with the Irvine Ranch Water District. And please stand by while I cue this up. And Enrique, you are live.
Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to share with you our meter to parcel project and looking forward for your feedback and comments. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit overview of the agenda is basics of Irvine Ranch Water District, the meter to parcel project, objectives, background, additional benefits that we found during the runtime, data and software requirements, the methodology that we use for mapping all of the meters that serve landscape, the final product that result from this project and future applications for it. Next slide, please. Irvine Ranch, serves about 181 square miles. That is 20% of Orange County. We have about 600,000 daytime population and 425,000 residents. 6 cities are served: Irvine, Lake Forest, part of Newport Beach, Tustin, Costa Mesa, and unincorporated Orange County. Next slide, please. The district is divided into 85 villages. I don't know how common is that, but it's really nice. For this project, helped a lot because we target village by village. So we were finished one village and starting the next one. Currently, there are a little bit more than 125,000 water connections, and 107 more or less out of those ones, 1,000 out of those ones have landscape associated with them. So I have 107,000 water connections that the billing system shows landscape on it. And all of those accounts were mapped in this project. Not only the dedicated irrigation, residential, any account that has landscape. We are under budget-based rate structure. Each customer receives a monthly water budget that provides for a reasonable amount of water for indoor and outdoor use. For outdoor use, the landscape area plays a big role there. Please, next slide. Okay, the objectives of the project is the meter to parcel project was implemented to improve the district's data accuracy on irrigated landscape by we are adding the geolocation of the landscape area associated with each water connection. So basically, we are making, let's say, a polygon that geolocates the landscape area for each meter. Also, to provide an alternative methodology to the Department of Water Resources approach for calculating the outdoor water budget. That in that case is based in the parcel assessor data and the land use code. As maybe you already know, the relationship between the water connections and the parcel is not perfect most of the time, at least in our district. You can have a perfect relationship when it's one-to-one, maybe in a single family home, but you can have like a one too many, so a meter is doing serving more than one parcel, many meters serving one parcel, or many too many, meters serving many parcels, and many parcels served by many meters. And the meters could be a combination of residential, landscape irrigation, commercial. So it's really difficult to link the parcel data with the billing system. At least I'm talking for in our case. Next slide, please. The background. This project began in 2017. We started geolocating the landscape area served by each water connection. Until now, the district has the landscape area associated with each individual connection, but we don't know where that area lives. In other words, I can pull the landscape area for a landscape irrigation or dedicated landscape irrigation meter. Let's say I have 1 acre, but I cannot tell you where that acre is. So that project is going to bring that information that is missing. And the end goal of the project is use that data, so the geolocation of the landscape area with, for example, the land use classification. So we can get the total irrigable area within for each individual connection, or other information like if there is a pool, how much turf, or any kind of classification inside that. Also, in addition to that, can be used in multiple other applications to the district, since you can intersect that data, join that data with other data sources, like we are planning to add other data sources. So I'm going to explain that later. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, additional benefit for the district that we found during the runtime. Carrying out this project allows staff to identify different kind of issues or errors. For example, many meters were found that were incorrectly geolocated. More than 300 accounts were incorrectly coded in the billing system, where the water budget may be higher than warranted. Those are, most of them are CII mixed use that maybe when they were created like 40 years ago, they were doing landscape, and then a new meter was added in that place, a dedicated irrigation meter, but the landscape area was not removed in the billing system. So we are still calling them mixed use when they are not doing landscape today. In addition, staff found some connections that were not set up in the billing system, and a couple of illegal connections as well, like the one in the picture. So we were providing water for free in some areas. Identifying and correcting these errors improved the data in the district billing system, and that was fine. All of those issues were found when we ran the project. Next slide, please. Data and software requirement. Very quickly, these are the data sources and software we use to run the project. Basically, it's the customer data for water connection that serve landscape, aerial imagery. The district acquires one every year. It's a 3-inch 4-band. The meter geolocation that is provided by the GIS department as well with the parcel assessor data. We use the land use code, but that is optional. But that is a second step of this project, that when we intersect this project with the land use classification. The GIS software, we use ArcGIS, but there are other options like QGIS that is open source free license. And we tested two GIS applications to collect the data in the field. One was a web-based field application from Eagle area, and the other one was a art collector based from DCSC. Honestly, neither of them worked well. We selected the web-based from Eagle area, but we couldn't use it in the field. It was super slow, so we find at the end we printed the maps in hard copy paper, take those maps to the field and make the draw there, and then upload the data in the office. Next slide, please. Okay, preparing the data for the mapping. Basically, we identify all the connections serving landscape using the billing data, and we classify those connections, water connections, into two different groups. We call in-office mapping. Those ones, if the landscape area can be mapped using aerial imagery and the parcel data, are classified as in-office. Basically, it's most of the residential connection. There are 98,000 accounts in that group. And the other group is in-office or in-field mapping. That is any other connection that we cannot map using just aerials and parcel data. So we need to map them with a field verification. So we have two groups, and now I'm going to explain each one a little bit. Next slide, please. So for the office, completing the in-office mapping portion, at the first, we have 2 rounds in office. We call 2 rounds. The first round, round is almost 64,000 accounts is out of those 98 residential water connections, and those accounts are the relationship between the meter and the parcel is 1-to-1. So are basically single family homes. As you can see in the picture, we have 2 parcels there and 2 meters. The parcel was used as a default area for that for those homes, and we link the meter to the parcel using 3 different attributes, like the attributes were the distance between the meter and the parcel. We found the closest parcel to each meter. Then we use the address in the billing data for that meter and the billing, and we find the same billing address in the parcel data and the ownership as well. So we use within those 3, sometimes the address match well, sometimes the distance, and sometimes the ownership. So using those 3, we link all of them very quickly in the office for the 64 connection. As you can see in the picture, part of the front yard is not covered by the parcel data. So that issue is resolved later when we put together the field data with the in-office data, because we need to check if that area is irrigated or not by the homeowner association, let's say. Next slide, please. For the field survey, okay. This one is a little bit more complex than those 2 pictures, but we hire 2 teams of 2 temporary employees to do the job. So we contact the owner of the account or the customer that is under that name and request maps or the landscape. We explain a little bit about the project and try to get in touch with the landscape contractor. And then we schedule an appointment with the landscape contractor and survey the facility. So the approach was print a hard copy in the office, take to the field, run some stations and draw the map. You don't need to run all the stations after some training. You need to run just the landscape. The contractor is going to tell you, okay, more or less the borders, and then you need to run only the stations that are around the border, and you can find very quickly the borders for all of them. That is on the left. On the right is the same data that was uploaded to GIS in the office because the field application didn't work well. So we have the survey and the uploaded already the data to GIS. Next slide, please. Okay, then when we finish a village, so we have all the in-office link and all the field meter survey for a village, we combine both data sources in one layer. And we need to resolve basically usually 3 types of issues. The first issue we call extend parcel is on the left. In that case, we don't have from the field verification, we don't have any meter doing the parkways. So that means that the homeowners are doing the parkway, and our approach was extend the parcel to cover that area. If I have to start over the project, I will change a little bit. I will prefer make a new polygon covering that area, because making a new polygon, I can flag that as a parkway. And if there is, for example, turf grass, I will remove that turf grass for a rebate program, because no one is going to replace that with or it's not probably to replace that with drought tolerant plants. But it's working well so far. The other one is cut parcel. In that case, we bring data from the field and overlaps the parcel layer. That means that the homeowner association with a dedicated landscape irrigation account, let's say, is doing the front yard. So we need to cut the parcels and make them shorter to apply it only to the landscape area that is covered by the homeowners in that case. And the last one is for the remaining 34,000 residential accounts. Those ones are basically condominium in a master parcel. So there is one parcel, a big parcel that has multiple units inside. So we don't have individual parcel for each condominium. So for those ones, we bring the data from the field, and in that case is the purple that is doing the common area and the front yard for those condominiums. So in the office, we draw a polygon for each individual condominium. So, and then we link with the connection. We add to that polygon, we include the connection ID. Next, please. Okay, that is how looks the final product. I just add some colors, but basically this project provides only polygons that has the relationship between polygons, between meters and polygon is 1. Each meter may have 1 too many polygons, but each polygon belongs to 1 meter always. So each polygon is irrigated by the landscape area within the polygon is irrigated by 1 meter. So in that case, I just use different colors to differentiate the service point type, but we have in yellow residential, single family homes. Purple is showing dedicated landscape irrigation recycled water. Green is dedicated landscape irrigation potable water. It's very complex village. Blue, we have a multifamily, residential multifamily, like a master meter condominium. On red, residential condominium individual meters. And gray, commercial areas. So we survey with commercial accounts. So that is just polygons. The good thing of this project is that we can intersect that polygon with different data sources, and we can bring the data inside the polygons. Next slide, please. So what happened when I intersect, oh, the picture, I don't know if you can see well, what happened when I intersect a polygon, those polygons with the land use classification. In that case, you can see that I have at the very beginning the service point ID, that is the connection ID. That with that ID, I can pull all billing system for that service connection. But also I have everything from the land use classification already inside the polygon. Irrigated area, irrigable, not irrigated, total irrigable, not irrigated, agriculture, artificial turf, horse corrals, and so I have everything there in each individual polygon, and I can link that to the database. The difference getting the area in that way, that the landscape, the total landscape area, in that way with the current that we have in the system is, I believe the system is just a picture that you took one day, but then never is updated. We have landscape areas that were created in the 90s. We don't know if that area has changed, because it's pretty difficult to keep update those areas in the database. But with that approach, we can run almost every year. Each time that we run the land use classification, we can intersect that layer with the meter to parcel and get the landscape classification inside the meter to parcel project. Next slide. Okay, this one is the more interesting. Is the future application. To me, this project is going to open like a new generation of water efficiency programs. For example, now we are going to run a new water efficiency program for pools in residential area, in residential homes. So before, if we want to run a program like that, we need to target all the customers in the district, because we don't know how many customers has a pool. But also we don't know how many pools are there, or how the size of the pool, the average size of the pool. Now with this project is completed, we can extract all residential houses with pool, for example, inside the green tree village in that case. It's just one query, very simple query, and it's going to bring me all the customers that has a pool. But not only the pool, I can have the average size of the pool. I can classify the pools between, let's say, medium or small, medium, and large, and I can make a different target for each type of customer. The same I can do like for, let's say, I can bring all the customers that has more than 500 square feet of turf and run a program for those customers. Another application is, for example, intersect the meter to parcel with the parcel assessor data. And in that case, for example, for residential home, I can bring inside those little polygons when the home was built, when was the last renovation, how many bedroom, bathroom, heating, type of heating, cooling system, all that information I can have for the customers, and I can update every year that very quickly. It's just one push one button. Another option is like you can evaluate the evaluation of landscape change over time. So if you run the land use classification every 5 years, you can compare how the customer changed the landscape. If the landscape is moving from grass to more like a friendly landscape, or is stuck. So you can do a lot of analysis. It's going to help. I don't know how much time I have. It's going to help customer service departments as well. When a customer calls for landscape variance, that information is right away. It's going to help, for example, the recycle department, because recycle meters must be inspected between 1 to 4 years, I believe, depending of the size and the location. So in that case, the district can provide to the contractors that are doing the inspection the maps, so they know exactly the area that they need to inspect. Another application is for water loss. I have a couple of ideas. One is create a very simple very simple web application that you can drop a point. Let's say you see like a broken pipe anywhere in the district. So you drop the point where is the pipe, and we can connect exactly which meter is involved, or is the pipe belongs to which meter. So we can contact right away to the customer. Or other application is bringing satellite data. That's something that we are planning to do. Is a satellite data in a monthly basis from a SAR. Is a type of microwave that penetrates the soil and provides a really nice correlation with the humidity in the soil. So if you have the humidity in the soil, you can make a map is similar to the land use classification, but the humidity in the soil. And you can use for detecting broken pipes in the customer side, or broken pipes in our in the district side, as well as improve the algorithm that we are running for detecting malfunctioning meters. Let's say I have a meter that they use it drop, landscape irrigation meter that they use to start dropping, going down. But I check and the humidity in the soil remains the same than before, and similar to the neighbors that are using the normal amount. So I can flag that, flag that meter for field inspection. Maybe there are something else to do, but I believe there are brings a lot of options for us. Next slide, please. And the last one, I believe is. Okay, that is when I said that maybe that we are going to an alternative methodology to the Department of Water Resources. The Department of Water Resources is providing us the parcel, residential parcels that are selected by the land use code. So in the left side, you have for a village, all the residential parcels based in the land use code. And according with the Department of Water Resources, we need to link those parcels with a residential connection. That, as I mentioned before, the relationship is not perfect. In our district is quite complicated, and that's why this project can help us. Okay, and in the picture in the center shows you, okay, according with the Department of Water Resources, excuse me, on the left, all the landscape area within those parcels should be linked with a residential connection. According with our project, only the landscape area within the light blue areas are irrigated with a residential account, okay? And on the left shows the whole picture for our district. So the light blue area, the landscape within the light blue area is irrigated by residential accounts. The landscape within the purple area is irrigated by dedicated landscape accounts with recycled water. And the dark blue is a commercial water that is serving, in that case, a pool in a residential parcel. But also, you can see that the landscape, the dedicated landscape irrigation accounts are not doing only the residential parcel, are covering other areas that are not classified as a residential. So they cross the border because there is not nothing to that. You know, there is not like a wall. So that is the complexity to not only at least in our district, to link the meters only by the parcel land use code. And that's it for the project. Thank you so much.
Efren, do we have any questions for Enrique?
Yes, hi Enrique. We had one question, and the question is, what is the number of staff that worked on the in-office compiling and the out-of-office compiling of the data?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, in office we started with one team for the field verification. Is 2 temporary employees, and 1 GIS person, a temporary employee as a GIS person. That is how we started. 2 persons, because we need 2 persons to survey the meter. 1 person is usually in the meter, checking if the meter is moving, and the other person is walking when and running the station and making the map. And the GIS person did for all residential accounts, and then combine both layers. Later, like a year ago, no, it's more than a year, it's a year and a half ago, we add a second group, a second team for the field verification. Again, 2 temp employees. But also we have some accounts, about 600 accounts, where surveyed by the recycle contractors, the ones that are inspecting the recycle meters. We add those to the project. So when they're saving a meter that we don't have information yet, so they map that meter and send to us the maps, and we upload the data. That was a little bit more complicated because we found some issues in the maps that they send. So then we started QC in the field 10% of the maps that they submit to us. Let's say they submit in a week 10 maps. I'm going to check at least 1 map that week and see if they map well. And it's not random. We choose, we look which one is more likely to have errors, because we found many errors at the beginning. And I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you, Enrique. Efren, are there any other questions?
Well, there's a couple other questions. We can answer them now, or we can hold them to the end of the presentations. So they look to be pretty general, so maybe we can hold off to the end of the presentations.
Okay, that sounds great.
One more, I didn't add those ones. Also, we have other staff working. I was working that project, not full time for the project, and maybe 1 more person working in the project as well. Neither of us full time, just maybe a couple of hours per week.
Great, thank you, Enrique. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and bear with me while I pull up the next presentation. Okay, so our next presenter, oops, so add content. Sorry about this. The next presenter is Jenna Shimon, Conservation Manager from Coachella Valley Water District. Jenna, you are live.
Great. Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. As Joni said, I'm Jenna Shimon with Coachella Valley Water District and the Conservation Manager here. Next slide, please. Next slide. Is it not? There we go. So just a quick overview. I'll talk about CVWD, what makes up the district, our budget-based tiered rate formula, history of dedicated irrigation meters here at CVWD, and what we consider our formula for conservation success. Next slide, please. So this is our boundary map. We're located pretty far southeast of Los Angeles, just to give everyone kind of an idea. And we span from the Whitewater area all the way to the Salton Sea, which is kind of a hot button item right now within the state, and lots of workshops happening for it. Next slide, please. So the district was established in 1918, and we span about 1,000 square miles. and touch 3 counties, Riverside, Imperial, and just a very small portion of San Diego County. We have 110,000 connections roughly, always growing. We have lots of new developments coming in. And we serve a population of 300,000, which does see some seasonal variance during what we consider the season, which would be from about September, October, all the way through like March, April, depending on how hot it is. Our main 3 industries here are golf, agriculture, and hospitality. We have had a budget-based tiered rate since 2009, and within that, we've had dedicated irrigation meters since 1993 for a portion of our customers, and then for all customers since 2003. And the services that we offer here at the district are domestic water, obviously. We do groundwater replenishment of imported water, agriculture irrigation and drainage, regional stormwater protection, wastewater treatment, recycled water, and conservation, which is my favorite. Next slide, please. So the formula that breaks down for our budget-based tiered rates is there's 5 tiers, and there really are just 3 kind of categories. So the first is tier 1, or indoor use. And so obviously this would only apply to residential properties, not to our dedicated irrigation meters. But I just wanted to give everyone kind of an idea of how we calculate our budgets here at the district. And so then there's tier 2, which would be our outdoor use. And so that is used using the landscape area of the property assigned to the meter, what the weather is in the area. And we have 1 weather station here, and then based on the proximity of the parcel to that weather station, we use a weather zone factor. We also take into account a monthly plant factor, since we have a bit of a much warmer summer than a lot of people will see as far as temperature fluctuations. And then we have our volumetric conversion to gallons. And then we assume that everybody's irrigation system is operating at least a 70% efficiency. Because no system is at 100 probably day 1 after it's installed. You'll start having problems. And so we tell our customers if they can at least keep their system at a 70% efficiency, that'll help keep them within their budget. And for our monthly plant factor, it's roughly what we try to tell customers: if they can have as close to 50-50 turf to desert landscaping, they should be able to maintain their budget as well. And then tiers 3 through 5 fall into this inefficient use category. So it's everything that we kind of would consider excessive beyond what we determine that a property should be using if it's the most efficient. And so within that, our dedicated irrigation meters, they obviously, as I said, don't have any kind of billing for tier 1, so they bill straight to tier 2. And then they run tiers 2 through 5. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our dedicated irrigation meters were first required in 1993, and this applied to any properties with over 2,500 square feet of landscape. And then in 2003, we did an update where we required all non-single family residential properties to have it. And so basically our code, we clarified it to say that all new and rehabilitated landscaping for public and private projects, such as commercial centers, golf courses, parks, common area landscaping, developer-provided residential landscapes, and single-family tracts, and multifamily projects, private and public schools, medians, islands, and businesses will now all require a dedicated irrigation meter. And with that, there are connection fees. Then in 2015, with the update to UWUO, we made an additional adjustment to now include all large single-family residential properties that have over 5,000 square feet of landscape area. This does actually occur not as frequent. We do have a decent amount of these kind of properties in some of our larger country clubs. However, they're a little bit older, but as people build new homes within these developments, we are still getting this where we have large residential properties that do have these irrigation meters as well, which is super helpful on those ones because we can come out and pinpoint where their problems are when they have a high water bill, as opposed to the older properties. And then for our budget setup, we've got a couple issues. As I mentioned when we start in tier 2. So we have 2 different ways that we set up our irrigation meters. You can have for billing convenience for our customers, we have what's called a 4-digit master account. And so that just means all of their meters are on one bill. However, the budget is not collective. Each meter's budget sticks with just that meter. But then we have what's called a 5-digit master account. And so what that means is that those meters are hydraulically looped in our system, or in the field, excuse me. So in our system, obviously, they have to have a collective aggregated budget because we don't know what meter is using what. And so that's kind of the way we set up our budgets here. And that's more driven by customers than necessarily what our preference would have been. And so some other ways that we've set up the budgets for the meters, the landscape budgets, for all new builds, they are required to provide landscape plans. And so for a lot of our HOAs, the HOA itself is responsible for the irrigation of the front yard. And then the residents are responsible for the irrigation of if they have a courtyard or a backyard, things like that. And so one thing that's happened is our rule and reg is written so that if a single family property is built, they get 45% of the lot for their budget initially. And that's because a lot of times the backyard hasn't been landscaped. So if they provided landscape plans, it's just going to be for the front. One thing we found, though, is throughout the history of having tiered rates and irrigation meters is that there's an overlap where sometimes the homeowner is getting credit for their front yard and the HOA is. And so that's something that we're constantly having to go back and shore up. And so those landscape plans are helpful, but like I said, the backyards aren't really done. And so we get a lot of this weird overlap because of the way our rules and regs are written, but so far we can't come up with a better solution, for giving the single family lots. And HOAs are changing. Sometimes they are at the beginning, they're not responsible for the landscaping in the front yard, and then they change it. So it's something where we're kind of having to just work through the problems as they come to us. And we map all of our properties. A staff member actually maps them using aerial imagery. Currently, we're using a program called Global Mapper. However, that software is no longer supported by the manufacturer. So we are making our transition over to ArcGIS. However, because the state gave us our landscape area measurement data to assess, and we have 1,000 square miles and lots of parcels within that, that transition is on hold temporarily. However, we are very close to being able to start using ArcGIS, which it's a mix. So Global Mapper is kind of nice because you can save individual properties and work on them for like independent projects, and it doesn't affect what anyone else looks at. But ArcGIS is nice because if I do something, everyone else gets to see it. So that's why we're transitioning ultimately over to that. As I mentioned, there's always issues with every system. Nothing's ever perfect. And so one of our biggest issues is these hydraulically looped meters in the field. Sometimes it's intentional. Customers did that on the onset when they installed their landscaping, and sometimes it happens accidentally. And so what can happen is a landscape company, gets changed, and they go out there and they make some kind of a change with the type of system or the type of irrigation or the type of plants, and they hook one line to another, not knowing that they initially were separated. And so now you don't know what's serving, what meter is actually, pulling water from what area. And so that requires us to change from that 4-digit master to a 5-digit master so that they get that collective budget. Sometimes it's a huge issue when you have customers who tie in things that would go to the sewer. So like if there's like a landscape area around a pool, and then they decide that they're going to put restrooms at the pool, or showers at the pool area, they'll sometimes tie into that irrigation meter. And so then we have to come to them and say, you either need to separate it back out, or we're going to change the use of this meter and you'll have to pay sewer on everything that runs through it. So typically people will disconnect their sewer items off of there because they don't want to pay for the charges on that. Another thing that happens sometimes is we have a requirement here that it's 1 meter per parcel. And so if customers want a meter to serve more than 1 parcel, they would need to merge the parcels. And so when that happens, when we find out about that, it kind of creates an issue, and development services has to go out and get involved with that. Some other things I mentioned, like the change of use, sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's accidental. You have a landscape company that did something in the beginning, you hire someone new, they don't know what the system was. So that happens, but sometimes it intentionally happens where customers want things looped or they want to tie their things in, but they don't let us know. And so we find out when their bill's high or when we go out and do some kind of an in-field investigation. One thing unique thing that we've seen once or twice here and there is when a housing development is getting done. So we have this gated community that was built out in phases, and they started it right where the economic bubble burst in 2008, and so it stalled. And what oddly happened was they had this second HOA come in to take care of the pool in the clubhouse, but what they didn't know was that there was the landscape was connected, and so they had these 2 meters where both entities were paying for a meter that they never told us they connected. And one day they finally came in, we're like, okay, we're going to be putting the new homes in, we need to install a meter, and can you help us? And we found this weird connection, and then it was a really big issue trying to decide who was going to pay for the severing their connection between the irrigation systems and all of that. So there's a lot of weird things that you find with dedicated irrigation meters that I don't think would happen so much with mixed use meters. That's kind of some of our more common things. So one thing we do for our customers too is they can always appeal if they think their budget is incorrect. Typically, if it's incorrect, it's because they've made changes out in the field that they didn't notify us about. Very rarely is it because we mapped it wrong or something, you know, got put wrong in our system. It does happen, but typically it's because the customers have made changes out in the field. But we do have some checks and balances on that. So we'll come out and we go walk with their landscaper and have them turn on all the valves, and we see what meter it's actually affecting. And so we kind of hand map it, and then we'll go or hand draw out what serves what. And then we go back in the office and either use Global Mapper or ArcGIS to hand map it out too. And we always submit that to the customer ahead of time so they can confirm, because every now and then they might think we've missed a little area. We do annual flyovers for aerial imagery. However, depending on the time of year and the time of day, shadowing can become an issue along walls and tall buildings. And so sometimes we may think an area is, you know, not landscaped, and then it turns out that it is because the customer can show us. So we do adjust based on that. Another thing we offer to our customers are mitigation plans. And so if they have meters that aren't looped, and they don't want to pay to have that done because it can be kind of costly, but they think that if they had an aggregated budget, they would be able to meet their budget. We do allow them to submit a plan to show how they're going to reduce their water use by 20% versus 2010. And so if they can prove that they're going to do that, and then they obviously have to prove that over the course of 5 years that they're meeting this 20% reduction, we'll allow them to have an aggregated budget. We've only have approved, I think, like 5 of those because a lot of people just don't want to go through the hassle of whatever it is. They just will find ways to individually get their meters or their budgets, their water use down on their budgets. But we do have some people where it's been or some HOAs where it's been very effective. And so we do offer it, and only every now and then do we find that their water use spikes back up, but usually it's attributed to a leak. Next slide, please. So this is just some examples of our mapping. The image here on the left is a condo HOA. And so it's kind of hard to tell. The middle is blue and then there's a purple, but they are different. So this one's actually a really nicely done one where they have their individual meters. They have their 5 individual meters here that serve individual areas, and they haven't interconnected anything. I will say that this mapping was done about a year before they made some changes, and they took some turf out from around a pool and accidentally tied into 2 meters. So now they do have a little bit of a difference, but this is what we would like to see, where it's a little more clean cut, designated areas not connected. But that doesn't always happen. Then on the right here is a large country club that has, I forget how many HOAs. They have several HOAs within this community. So these are all single family residential properties of varying sizes. And you can see where the irrigation meters serve, you know, sometimes the front of the home, sometimes just the actual landscape area, like the perimeter around the wall. But what was fun about trying to map this one is I think there's 3 property management companies, and I think it's 12 HOAs, and they are very particular about how their bills are connected. And so they found some looped meters between 2 different HOAs and 2 different property management companies. So they had to fix that. But that was a fun project. Lots of homes, lots of different plates to keep spinning on that project. Next slide, please. So this is one of our local hospitals, and they have several meters, but they're all looped out in the field. And it's kind of nice to be able to do this because this is a nice clean one too, where you can see like the medians and everything. But it's kind of nice for us to see it like this, because this helps us too when they want to apply for rebates. We can look at areas where we can already identify like, okay, well, we don't want to, you know, focus here. We can help you focus on these larger grass areas. So having the mapping ahead of time, you know, we can walk into talking about rebates with them, knowing, well, we know you have X amount of square feet of landscape area and a quick, you know, look at this aerial imagery. We can see that you've got these large grass areas. We also throughout time have gotten really good about telling where problems can typically be. So looking at these areas or these aerial imagery, we can sometimes just say, oh, it's probably going to be in this area. And then when we go out to the property, there we already have it. Next slide, please. This is two other mapping. So one is a commercial Stratton Mall. I think it's our actual mall, and then there's also like some businesses behind it. So this is just showing how we did all the medians there, and then another HOA on the side where they do only the front yards, and so the backyards are just included on a separate mapping for the individual meters for the property owners themselves. Next slide, please. And so we recently got asked this. We're having a conversation with the state about dedicated irrigation meters, and they asked if we thought that tiered rates and or the irrigation meters are what makes conservation successful. And it really is like having a little bit of everything. So the tiered rates help because it helps customers identify what would be efficient use. And also for our large landscape customers, we have where we do a rolling 3-year annual ET. I think it's three or 5. And so basically we can give them like kind of a predicted budget for the next month or two. And so that's helpful because it kind of gives these large landscape customers a target to hit. And it also helps them for like budgeting purposes when they do that down the line. They can kind of have an idea of how much the water is going to cost and how much they'll use. And so it also is helpful because when there's problems with their billing system, that's usually the first place they'll notice it is when their predicted budget is kind of off. So we get calls ahead of time, which is great because then we can fix things before they get billed as opposed to afterwards. And then so that's the tiered rates, how that works into the successful conservation. Then dedicated irrigation meters, it helps identify outdoor versus indoor use, obviously, and where a majority of leaks are, especially for our single family residential large landscape properties. A lot of them are vacation homes or second or third homes for people. And so when they're not here, that irrigation meter spikes up. And so we know instantly that something's up. Whereas on our other properties where single family properties really don't have a dedicated irrigation meter, they'll sometimes go 2 or 3 months where they've had their property manager come out and try and identify it and do this before they call us. And so, going 2 or 3 months, that's a lot of water that could be being wasted. And so with the dedicated irrigation meter on those lots, we're able to identify it a lot faster. And then for customers, on large landscape customers, they can identify where their highest water use areas are and then target them for their own, for our rebates, but also for their own internal projects. And like I mentioned, it saves them money on sewer costs. And then another big component for our successful conservation efforts here is we have a pretty robust program menu for our rebates. We offer several for indoor and for outdoor, everything from turf conversion and converting from overhead spray to drip irrigation. Indoors, we have toilets, washing machines, and then kind of a hot ticket one for us out here is hot water recirculating pumps. We just started that last year and it's been pretty successful, and lots of people have called and thanked us for having that program. We're also always willing to try new things. So we'll do our research to see if there's any actual water savings that could be had from it. And so we'll run new pilot programs. That's actually how our washing machine and hot water recirculating pump rebate programs came about, is they were pilots. We're considering a dishwashing rebate, and eventually we'll get some CII audit training, and we'll be super happy to finally offer some targeted rebates for our CII customers, which will obviously start as pilots. And then we offer conservation reviews to all of our customers, no matter what size property they have. So, we go out for our residential customers, which a lot of that's more educating them about their irrigation system and helping them reset their irrigation clock. But for our large landscape customers, it's really a way for us to help pinpoint to them areas where they should focus their efforts for turf conversion or irrigation upgrades and things like that. It also gives us a really good feel for like what kind of irrigation systems, how old they are that we have out in our system, a better feel for how much is being converted from overhead spray to, we have a good feel for how much is artificial turf, how much is, regular turf, things like that. So really, being out there in the field and offering this has really helped us with our large landscape customers to understand what really is going on in our service area. It also has helped us establish relationships with these customers. You've got property managers and landscape companies that service numerous properties throughout our service area. And so once we can get a relationship with them at one property, they're far more likely to call us at another and have us come out because they trust what we're doing and they understand now. I think there's this big stigma that having the water agency come out and walk your property is going to lead to all sorts of problems. And we've really worked hard to make sure people know that we are there to help them And it's not about us trying to, like, impose penalties or find things that are wrong and point it out to them and find some way to, get them in trouble. It really is our way of trying to help them out. And so, we do, I'd say at least once a week, we go out to a large landscape and do a walkthrough with a customer. But my staff are going out several times a week to single family residential properties to do these conservation reviews. So it's a pretty popular program we offer. And I mentioned we can identify areas for improvement or of concern. Sometimes customers don't know that something's not functioning properly or that it could be done a better way. We do have some HOAs and condo complexes that were built in the 50s, and their irrigation system has probably never been updated from its initial installation. And they also truly like the landscape company that they have and have had for 10, 20, 30 years. The problem is, though, that there's no desire there to really update and upgrade. And so when we come in, we can show, like, this is great here, but if you just did one little change here, you could save a lot of water. And so that's actually given us a really great way to help, make a better connection too between the landscaper and the HOA board that they're dealing with. Because a lot of times the landscaper wants to do these things, but the board isn't on board with it. And so us coming in and kind of saying, oh, no, it's really easy. You can do it this, you could do that. That's helped us, help our customers improve and build these better relationships with the landscapers. Next slide, please. And that's everything. I don't know if there's any specific questions for me.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jennifer. I don't see any questions in the Q&A.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to send it over now to our next presenter, who is Brian Hojnacki from the City of San Diego. And let me get his presentation queued up here. And make sure Brian is...
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. I just want to make sure that I'm sending you a picture up there. Let's see. I'm learning. All right, you're on, Brian.
Okay, great. Good morning. I see my slide there, so thank you. Yes, I'm Brian Hojnacki, the Supervising Management Analyst for the City of San Diego, working in the Water Conservation section. We have our dedicated irrigation meters here for you to review, and can give you some of the information of what we have on file and within our databases. Next slide, please. So just some of the city stats. We have approximately 1.4 million residents within the city. Our water production right now for 2020 is 164,000, a little over 164,000 acre feet a year. Our total number of meters, 308,604. So quite a bit of meters out there. Our dedicated irrigation meters right now, a little over 8,000, and that's from our billing section. Our GPCD right now is at 102 for the entire city. Our residential GPCD is at 55, and for our indoor-outdoor use at 55% indoor and 45% outdoor, we're right around 30. So we're looking at a pretty good numbers for our conservation to meet all of our state standards. And, we'll see how things go with the state possibly proposing lower. But luckily we just did our urban water management plan, so we were able to have some really good data, especially at this time. So next slide, please. Our service area, it's approximately the same boundary as our city boundary, so it's pretty helpful that our customers are our residents, and we can communicate with them directly, and we have a little bit of direct relationship with them since they are city customers, and we provide the water directly for them as a city agency. We also provide some wholesale water to Cal-Am, South Bay, Otay, and Del Mar. You'll see one of our, on our map there, some of our water that we provide is down in San Ysidro, so we have a pretty big gap between where city proper is and then our city other area of San Diego down in San Ysidro. So, but we do provide water to different areas. Next slide, please. So our dedicated irrigation meters, as I said earlier, we are at little over 8,000 meters. Total irrigation usage, this is for 2020, on those meters, approximately a little over 18,000 acre feet a year, which equates to just around 11% of our total water production of that 165,000 acre feet. You'll see here in this breakdown, single family residential obviously is our biggest water use. Again, there is irrigation in there, but we do break that out. Unfortunately, they don't have dedicated irrigation meters. Our multifamily residentials at 23% of our total usage, commercial industrial 25%, and again irrigation's at 10%. So it's a pretty small amount for our total irrigation on our dedicated accounts. So it's a lot of work through this process for not a large amount of our water usage. So again, for our water use objective, more likely we're going to focus on some of our bigger areas. Okay, the next slide, please. We do have a landscape ordinance in place for dedicated irrigation. New development over 5,000 square feet and greater. Also, new single dwelling units. Every new single dwelling unit must have a dedicated irrigation meter. We also have a irrigation submeter ordinance. So if you were to do an improvement to over 1,000 square feet of landscape and you don't already have a dedicated landscape irrigation meter, you're gonna have to put one in. And it goes through, that's typically our multi-dwelling units, multifamily. And again, that's just for common landscape area, commercial and industrial. Next slide, please. So again, more of our irrigation meters, all customers are eligible to get a DIM. If you're a resident and you want to have one put in, you could do that. But we do have ordinances to capture various components of the landscape to make sure that you do have it, the 1,000 to 5,000 square foot in landscape. Our meter fees are anywhere from $26 for a 5/8 inch line all the way up to a 16-inch line at $3,000 a month. So that is a monthly fee, and then our irrigation folks are paying a little over, well, pretty much $7 HCF, 100 cubic feet. Our application is through the Development Services Department. So if you want to do a project, if your project requires a business or a permit or some sort of city review, that's where we're going to capture the MAWA and making sure that your plan includes all of the new landscape conservation topics, formulas, plant types, and things like that. Our domestic rates are tiered by usage. So if you use a little, you pay a little. If you, the more you use, the more you're charged. So it's a conservation type tiered structure. That's for just our domestic folks. But for the landscape, it's at $7, and that's right about in the middle of the tiered rates for our domestic. So they're not being overcharged or undercharged. It's pretty much a close number of where we are with domestic. Next slide, please. Just wanted to show you some of our top users. Not so much about how much they use, but it's the landscape that we have in our area. So you'll see that our parks and rec areas are really our largest irrigation landscaped areas. So as we go through this process of determining irrigation for dedicated meters, we're really kind of studying our own departments and our own land. You'll see Parks and Rec all the way down through there. Again, some of them are the school districts that we provide water to. They also have a lot of irrigation, Caltrans, and then you'll also see our residential usage at 380. So we have residential customers that have dedicated irrigation lines, and so they're in our top users as well. Mission trails, park and rec golf courses, and again, our open space and just general city parks is a big piece of our irrigation. Next slide, please. So for our discussion of how are we going to tackle this process with providing a measurement of all of our irrigation and our landscape, we're going down two paths. One is the GIS function, like most people are doing, and using the land codes from the parcels from the county, and doing as much analysis on that as we can. We also had through our urban water management plan, we were able to also determine our irrigation through our landscape through the dedicated irrigation meters through that process. So we're getting there. We haven't had a lot of discussion yet on it, but what the city does have is this software called Water Smart Target. Some of you may have heard of it before, but it was a project that was developed through a grant, Prop 50, through the County Water Authority. And what this was it's an automated landscape area measurement. And basically what it does is allows you to draw a polygon around your area that you're looking at, and the software will disaggregate or differentiate landscape from hardscape. The program uses also infrared aerial imagery to identify plant material within the landscaped area. There's also formulas in there to assign evapotranspiration factors for the specified climate zone. The formula for it was developed by Cal Poly Pomona, and it had different inputs of evapotranspiration, irrigation efficiency, area of landscape, and the plant factor. But it ultimately provides you a water budget for the square footage of the landscaped area. Next slide, please. Some of the function that it has, it integrates with the billing database, so we're able to track a specific customer's budget by their billing period, or adjustable, put it over the whole year. It produces water use graphs and custom reports. Allows for manual adjustment to plant factors in the water budget calculation. And where we are right now is we're reviewing this program with the vendor to reprogram it so we can put multiple our 8,000 irrigation accounts in there through a GIS layer. Try to connect it with our actual parcels that we already have layers for, and have this program to do the work for us. The original intention of this program was for a regional use because, well, everybody's doing large area landscape measurements, and we needed something to provide a quicker way to do it other than our field staff going out, walking the landscape, measuring it out, calculating, the hardscape from the landscape. So this program was really ahead of its time when it came out, and ultimately I believe it was given over to the city because we provide our own landscape area measurements with our own field staff. But my goal, and as we walk through this, is to try to revitalize this as a regional program again, and get back into it. Our contract with it expires this year. Part of the issue with the program is that the program code is very old, and the vendor needs to rewrite it. It's going to cost some money, obviously, but it's through Civic Resource Group, and then also revamp it to add in these some sort of a new connection to parcel layers that will put this all in it. You can put all of your irrigation meters in at once. Right now it's an individual type process where you put in your customer information, it pulls up the account, and you draw the polygon around that landscape, and it will show you all the pieces in there. If we can go to the next slide, please. Hopefully you're able to see this okay, but you'll see the polygons in all of this, the snapshot of what it is. This is an infrared shot that shows the types of landscape that it's measuring, what it's differentiating. In the bottom left of the stats down there, you can see what it's breaking out and how it's working. And what it's doing is it gives you your total square footage of each of those parcels. It backs out the hardscape, so it gives you just your irrigation or just your landscape. And then from there, it also defines what are trees and bushes, and also down to turf. And then ultimately it gives you a square footage of your landscape. And from there, the back calculations of evapotranspiration, the different zones you're in, will give each of these customers a specific budget. So we do this program right now. It's only connected in our database for our irrigation customers. We don't have it connected for residential, but at this point we don't, that's not our plan right now because we're only working on dedicated irrigation. But I wanted to show this program and hopefully see if we can, revitalize it for its intended purpose, which was years ago before the state came up with this process. So that's it for my presentation on this. We're not super far along with our landscape measurements. Hopefully we've done a lot of work unintentionally and not knowing that we have it yet. And once we start compiling it, I think we'll find that we're a little bit further along than we thought. So, okay, that's my presentation. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Brian. Efren, I'm going to let you run the Q&A portion of our show.
All right, thanks, Brian. Thanks, Joni. So we don't have any direct questions for Brian's presentation, but we do thank you for your presentations, and we have a few questions for the group. So you can answer them if you feel they're appropriate for your agency. One of the questions that's pretty popular right now is whether agencies are using any technologies that could be used in lieu of the potentially required dedicated irrigation meters.
For the city, I don't have anything, and I'm not aware of any topics.
Jennifer, is your agency using any alternative technologies to dedicated irrigation meters?
No, and I'm trying to think if I've heard of anything at conferences or anything, and we don't use anything, and I can't think of anything I've even really heard of either.
Great, thank you. What about you, Enrique?
No, as well, we are not using.
Okay, great. So we have another question. Does your agency have a minimum size thresholds for converting mixed CII meters to dedicated irrigation meters?
Nothing for the city, no.
Oh, thanks, Brian. What about for Irvine, Enrique?
I'm not sure, but I believe there is not a limitation.
And Jennifer?
For converting our existing ones, I don't think we have a minimum.
Okay,
I'm
great.
sure if it was like 250 square feet, we might say that's not worth the cost. But
Okay, great. And then finally, what is your advice for an agency who's just starting out with measuring dedicated landscape areas?
Well, for us, for the city, you know, if you have your geocoded meters, you know, that's number one. Mapping them all and just finding out where they are and your basic consumption level. We're kind of in that same place right now of trying to figure out how we're going to measure all of this.
Great, thanks, Brian. Well, I think that concludes our questions. A lot of the questions that we got, you've already answered. So I think these presentations were very helpful. So thank you. Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for attending. We want to thank Janet and Enrique and Brian all for presenting and giving us that information. I hope you guys found it helpful. As I said before, 2024, January 1 of 2024 is when we're going to have this data all ready and put into our calculations. As you kind of heard from some of these, and Enrique especially, I think you said in the chat that you started in 2017 and you're almost finished. So,
Yeah, but
what?
we started very slow, like developing different approaches or how we're going to approach the field. So yeah, honestly, I believe the first field survey was in January 2018.
Okay.
And then the pandemic, we were very close to finish before the pandemic, like a year ago. So we couldn't do much surveys during the last year. So it's almost completed, but those two reasons like slow down a little bit.
So you have at least about 2 years. And how many meters did you say you had again?
We have we surveyed for the field 9,000 meters.
9,000.
Yeah, and in the office, I don't remember exactly, 98,000 meters in the office. Something, yeah, 98,000 meters in the office and 9,000 in the field. Not the 9,000 require field verification, because you can find some CII that you can link one, especially in the commercial area in Irvine. So it's one parcel, 1 meter. So those ones you can map in the office as well. I will say that maybe 85 of the 9,000 were field verification, have a field verification. And also we like I did an algorithm to find, it's like the field is like a puzzle. So at the end, for example, in each area you have just one meter that is missing to survey, and that the remaining area of the landscape you can link to that meter. So you can detect all of those ones and or select all of those meters to do not survey at the beginning and let them at the end with everything around is survey. The remaining area is for that meter. I don't know if that is very, I don't have any picture here to show,
yeah.
But let's say I survey all the accounts, all the meters around. So all the area around was covered. So the only remain area is for that meter.
Yeah.
So we saw we save some time doing that as well. I would say between 85 of the 9,000 were surveyed.
Okay. All right. Well, again, if there's no more questions, we thank you all for coming and for participating, and we'll go ahead and close it up there. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye,
Thank you.
everyone.